Hey guys, welcome to Tea Time Thursday with me and Alex. So Alex is currently restarting his Instagram and I just logged off and came back in to see if this works. So we're having some Instagram, what is it? Difficulties? I also don't see it as a difficulty though. Okay, let me see. We're learning. Okay, send me a request to join. Oh, there you go. Hey.
Hey, can
I
you hear
love
me? I got my earpods in.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
I love your green background.
Well, I know you got green jacket on. I got my green sweater.
Oh my
I'm trying to figure out my
god.
color. I like green, so I just did green for the live.
Me too. So we're totally vibing with like our heart chakra today.
And it goes with the promo material too. I noticed you had a lot of green, so.
Yes, it relates with like nature, and I love nature, and I try to show that with my spaces. But I want to share who you are, so I'm gonna read this because I don't want to miss anything out. But after I read it, I'm gonna ask you to share more of who you are for people who haven't heard about you or who don't know you. Okay?
All right.
So, and again, thank you for being here. I'm so excited that you're here. I was thinking about you and Efrain and Hugo earlier, and it makes me so excited. And I've said this on the other lives to have men who are doing the work and showing up. And
definitely, thank you.
You know, I think it reminds me a lot of like my own dad too, in a sense of like, oh my god, you guys are doing that work, and you guys are breaking the patterns, and I feel like I'm totally part of it as if I'm a dude with you guys.
Yeah, there's not many men. Well, there's men out there doing the work. It's hard. So, the more support systems we can have in place to get through this, because I think men want to do the work and they start and they realize it's scary, it's hard, it's difficult, confusing, dysregulating, and you have to heal in community. So Latino Dad Connection, shout out to them. Great group of guys,
Yes.
Efren and Hugo and Jose, like all good guys. So.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, let me introduce you. So this is Alex, guys. And let's see, he is a trauma-informed fatherhood and parent coach, a men's mental health advocate, and an early childhood education consultant. He helps fathers and parents build deep connections with their children and families by deepening their connections with themselves, right? So you, Alex, believes that, where is it? He believes that all fathers and parents want to be the best version of themselves and truly want to show up to their children and families. He holds a master's degree in early childhood education with an emphasis on childhood trauma and its effects on child development. So you've been working for over a decade in the field.
Yes. I'm not just hopping on Instagram trying to be a coach, which I am, but I have the background, right? So
yeah. Well, even if you were,
definitely.
right? It's also that personal experience.
I've had positions in nonprofit agencies as like a parent coach and a men's group facilitator, stuff like that. So I'm really pulling from lived experience, professional experience to kind of start my own thing, because I'm filling a gap I think that's not there, or that's not really being filled at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah. And congratulations, because you're totally doing it. Totally doing it.
Yeah, I kind of hit the ground running.
What happened?
I just hit the ground running. I had an idea and I went with it, and it just kind of all fell into place.
Sometimes that's all we need, just an idea.
Yeah.
And just consistency. Yeah. So aside from this, what else would you like to share, like who you are, before I ask you to tell me more?
Yeah. First and foremost, I'm a father. I am a father to a beautiful 7-year-old girl. She is my best teacher. She has taught me. She has motivated me to make change. I wasn't always able to express my emotions the way I can clearly express them now. It's almost as if night and day, right? Like I had this one way of being, and then I had these experiences, had a kid, realized I needed to make some change. Took me a few years to finally really find the direction of change I wanted to go into. So before all of the accolades and stuff when it comes to my career, I'm a dad, and that's what drives me.
That's sweet.
And I'm doing this trauma-informed fatherhood coaching and parent coaching. just because I know parents want to be the best version of themselves. I've worked with parents in crisis for my whole career. I've worked in programs that work with families with DCFS cases, families that are, facing homelessness, families that are being, having accusations of child abuse and neglect, families that are recently immigrated, and like just so much crisis. And in my time working with these families, I've noticed a lot of things. And one of the things I notice is these families, even if they have DCFS cases, which is Department of Children and Family Services, they want to be better parents. They want to be better parents, and they try hard. And because of the systems in place, it's just really, really difficult. It's difficult to be a better parent because it's not just about the classes we take. It's not about the strategies we put forth. It's really in here. It's if we show up whole, if we show up in a way where we can be the best version of ourselves, we can be the best version, mom or dad for our kids. And coming from my social service background, my mental health background, I've worked in maternal mental health, all that stuff. I do feel that parents truly want to be the best version of themselves. They want to be the best parent. Even if you feel like you're a horrible parent, I know there's an ounce of something inside someone's heart that they want to show up for their kids, right? And that's kind of what I'm here to do, is to remind people of that, because it's in you, and it's easy to get caught up in the noise. It's easy to get caught up in the stress and just like grind it day to day as a parent.
Yeah.
And if you stop and take a deep breath and you really want to show up for the best, like the best version of yourself for your kids, like it takes that time to be reflective, to look inward. And that's kind of where I've developed so much of my own processes to heal. It's just reflecting, asking myself questions and sitting with it, even though those answers are difficult. Even if those questions are difficult, I sat with it. And I really do believe if parents look inward, they can really unpack what it is to be the best parent they want to be. Not what I want to be, not how I want them to be, but how they truly want to show up for their kids.
Yeah, this year, it's the first time that I've worked with parents, and it's the first year that I've been working in the mental health field, and I'm working with parents and the kids, and I can see how parents do want to try, and sometimes they just don't know how. Or that guilt or that shame of them not knowing just stops them from even trying. And it's like, oh, like you have somebody come in and you teach them, just like how you said, even just how to take a deep breath. Or you teach them a little bit of like just yoga or one little thing, and they take it and they're so appreciative of it. So it's nice to see when parents are super open and they're willing to work on themselves, but also to be able to give to their kids so they can be well. And
definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I was going to ask you too with that. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. So with parents, so what made you, because I know you have 10 years in the field, right? And one of the things that I was curious about was like, what was a shift for you in that space to realize like, oh my God, I need to do my own work?
It was a long road to get to where I'm at. I'm very blessed in a sense where I look back at my lived journey and lived experience, and I'm like, whoa, everything just happened for a reason, right? So I'll quickly run through my background. So I was a kid with behavioral challenges, kicked out of middle. I'm going to turn that light off. It's kind of blinking like crazy.
Yeah, that's fine. That train of thought, I know exactly what I was going to ask you.
So I was a child who had a lot of behavioral problems, and it wasn't my fault. Sure, I had those behaviors in their mind, but I was in an environment that wasn't conducive to teaching me the skills and the emotional regulation I needed to have out in the world being preschool, elementary school, middle school. So I haven't always been this person who can speak on my emotions clearly. I've been someone that really suppressed my emotions, and all my emotions were filtered through anger, essentially. So after kind of in my 20s doing some careers in medical device manufacturing and stuff, I was not working with families and kids, but I was always volunteering. I volunteered to work with at-risk youth, and back then it was at-risk youth. I don't know what they call them now, but troubled youth, and it was teenagers. And I really was like learning along the way in these mentoring programs I was doing for these teenagers, and I was learning the tools that we're teaching these kids. A lot of reflective work, a lot of looking at, how can you show up and make sure that your opponent, meaning yourself, like you can work with yourself and provide yourself this guidance. And I learned that as a 20-something-year-old while I was mentoring these teenagers. Eventually, changed career, got laid off, and I decided to go back to school. Went to get my bachelor's in sociology, nonprofit administration. After my undergrad, I got accepted to a program called Teach for America. they placed me in it's a program that puts people in education systems or education settings where they're like low performing schools, high need schools. So I was placed in LA as a preschool teacher. I wanted to teach middle school or something. I was like, what the hell am I going to do teaching these little kids, right? Like, I'm a guy that used to throw tantrums. I got kicked out of preschool, like quite literally.
You're like,
And
preschool is not for
and
me.
I was just really upset at that point, like like just mad, really mad, like, man, this is just crap. You know, I was getting paid peanuts compared to all the other teachers, and I was like, I got to go work for this prestigious program, Teach for America, and teach preschoolers. And so I did. I took the challenge, and I went, and I learned so much, so much. I learned that no kid deserves to be feeling the way I felt when I was in preschool. I learned that the foundation of the human experience is based on your childhood. Like the way you see the world, the way you move in this world is based on what experiences you had in your childhood. And I also had the opportunity to continue my grad school with this program. They paid for it, so I was very lucky, very blessed. They paid for my grad school, you know.
That's awesome.
And I got my master's in early childhood education. And along the way, I started to learn stuff, social development, social emotional growth, and I started to really look inward and figure out, like, let me put the pieces back together. Little Alex, that was this tantruming, angry kid, wasn't a bad kid. I've been called a bad kid my whole life, or I've been called the problem child. I remember back in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, there was a movie called Problem Child, and like I remember people would call me that and like, oh, that movie's about you. And like people don't realize how powerful their words are and how much they stay with kids, right? They affect kids, and they affected me quite deeply. I've always believed this about myself. So when I had this opportunity to get into this field of early childhood education, I was a preschool teacher, and I had to learn to be with kids, and I found that being with kids for me was very natural. Because I felt their pain, I saw them for who they were, like those kids that were throwing tantrums and throwing toys and spitting in my face, literally spitting in my face. Of course, I wanted to revert back to screaming and just like, but I knew I could not do that, especially when I'm getting paid for this, right? So I had to find ways. I had to find ways to kind of change how I interacted and how I received these kids. And back then, I wasn't as self-aware as I am now. I didn't have the healing journey back then. But what it taught me is it taught me that I want to show up for these kids because I had kids in the classroom that reminded me of me. Like I was like, this little kid is me. Like this kid is this close to getting kicked out of the school, and I have to work with them to make sure that we get him back on track because I know he's hurting. I know his parents. I know he's coming from a place that might not be the most stable, and I can provide that stability for him in the classroom. So that was kind of like, okay, there's power in the knowledge I'm learning. And then I started to kind of reflect back on my lived experiences and go through and intellectualizing my traumas. I even have a master's degree in this stuff, and I studied it and I intellectualized it. I did research papers. I did all kinds of stuff, right? And I felt that it was all up here and it wasn't here. And
it's crazy.
Did that for many years.
It's crazy because I listened to your podcast that you were on, and like I've listened to your videos, and I've also been in space where it's very educational and logic, and I got my BA and I went back and forth with like getting my master's, but it's like being more in that space, I could see how people get it logically. Like, yes, you go to school and you do the hours of studying and hours of like tests and the books and everything, but it's one thing to get it logically, and it's a whole other thing to get it like with your body, you know? And it's like, and I feel like when you it totally helps when you get it logically, but then when you feel it in your body and you connect the two, I feel like the force or the energy to come and heal or to guide others is just like it's so much bigger in a way.
I use this analogy. Yes, I use this analogy. Like I had 10,000 hours of trainings, right? I had the classes. I literally went to classes to learn how to feel emotions and to teach kids how to feel their emotions and how to express themselves. And I'm over here like, thinking I'm sneaking into this, like, oh, they don't realize that I don't know how to do this shit. Like, I'm learning with them. I got to learn this stuff so I can teach kids, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I use this analogy, like, I had the 10,000 hours, right? And it was all up here, and it wasn't in here. And then when I had my kid, I realized all of this stuff up here was not keeping all the stuff from here coming up. All of the stuff, the reactiveness, the annoyance, the visceral feelings I would get when my daughter would trigger me. And I would be like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I know how I'm supposed to use these positive parenting strategies. I know I'm supposed to be this conscious parent. I have the trainings. I'm certified in this crap, right?
It's so different too, though, right?
I realized it lived in my body. when it's your kid, it's different. It's different. Like, it's so different. And any preschool teacher I've worked with will tell you that. It lived in my body. So I realized that a lot of the dysregulation I was bringing into my family or into my relationship with my daughter was coming from here. It wasn't coming from here. I can easily go, oh, I know how to consciously parent and validate and give her choices and make sure I'm getting down to her level. But unless I'm really heart-centered and coming from my heart from a place of regulation, none of that matters. So I had, struggles with a lot of mental health throughout my life. I think I'll go pretty deep and heavy. Like, I was suicidal my whole life, like since 9 years old. Right? Like, that's what I remember, the first serious thoughts of being suicidal. And that was something that I intellectualized because I had all of the information to say, oh yeah, of course I was suicidal. I experienced childhood trauma. Okay, it's no big deal. But when I had my kid, it made it so real. It made it so visceral. It dysregulated me because I needed to change. I needed to do something. So when I say I connected my brain to my heart, holy shit, it was scary. It was intense. It was dysregulated. So I had to take time off of work. I had to really go, okay, I can't do this right now. Like, these big feelings are coming up. And I was in therapy. I was doing EMDR therapy, which is a very intense. Well, I say it's intense because I took it very intensely. It's a trauma-informed modality that really supports kind of reprocessing your traumas and rewiring your brain, all that stuff. And I did that, and it really dysregulated me. But what it did is it provided me the opportunity to connect with my heart, to connect to my body. And when I connected, it got real quick. And I just was like, okay, I have to change. Like, I can't stay in this space right here in this dysregulation because I know what I have to be and I know I have the tools to get there. So the analogy I use is I had the 10,000 hours. It was as if I watched 10,000 hours of YouTube, how to fly helicopter YouTube tutorials, right? I knew how to fly helicopters because I've watched all the videos. And then all of a sudden, when I connected to my body, it was like I blinked my eyes open and I was in a helicopter flying it. And it was as if I was barreling down to the floor and to my rock bottom, right? Like, I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. My body was just feeling so much. And I almost killed myself, essentially, like 3-4 years ago. I was in this space 4 years ago. And I remember thinking, like, what's going on? I know I have all this knowledge in my brain. I know I have all this academic understanding of what's going on. Even science, like, I looked up all the stuff going on in my body.
Yeah.
And then I blinked my eyes open and I was crashing in this helicopter. And just because of those 10,000 hours of YouTube tutorials, I was able to finagle that helicopter just enough to not crash. And now I'm just learning how to fly it, right? And I'm learning it as I'm in the air. And I want to share that with so many people because people don't get that opportunity to, first of all, have that 10,000 hours of trainings or, information and resources that are going to help us understand what's going on in our body, right?
Yeah.
So I say that because once I was able to understand what was going on, I decided to go right at it. Many people might not know or have the resources or capacity to go right at it. At this point, it was do or die for me. Quite literally, it was do or die. Yeah. And I did it, and I did it every single day. Yeah. And it was so powerful that after waking up at 5 a.m, doing breath work, doing yoga, doing my meditation, doing my journal, everything the therapist told me I did, because it was, if I don't do this, I don't know how I'm going to live. And I did that for months.
I've heard,
every single day, 5 a.m.
Okay. I've heard from stories and just other people share their stories where it's like sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to change. Like, sometimes it takes that rock bottom of either I'm going to live or this is where it's just over. And if I live it, I have to try.
That was the thing. And it's pretty amazing because I did all these things that therapists have told me to do for years, 10 years, 15 years. I've been in therapy off and on. And I started therapy when I was a kid. And so I have all of these skill sets and knowledge. And when I was going through it, I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'll fucking journal. Before I was like, man, whatever. I wrote a half a page. It doesn't work. Wrote my affirmations. Doesn't work. Look myself in the mirror. Okay, doesn't work. I was so angry and I was beating myself. I was trying to beat the broken out of me. And I thought I was broken. I'm not broken. I'm not broken one bit. I'm completely whole. But in those moments, I thought I was broken. So what happened? I lost my train of thought on that right there. Anyways, we can always go back to that.
That's what that's what I felt like our conversations were going to be a little bit all over the place, because I'm like, I have these questions,
it's all good.
And there's these stories, let's do this. So then what I'm hearing you say too, it was like a process. It wasn't just automatically, okay, boom, I'm doing the work.
Yes.
And I'm healed and I'm aligned and I'm connected and I'm a great father.
No, yeah.
It sounds like
it wasn't that easy.
Constant work.
Work.
And
it takes work, and And I say the work works because it does. Like, it sounds such a silly little motto, right? The work
No,
works.
it's
What
great.
work? Well, what work? Well, first learn what work you have to do. It's all different for each person. So I remember the thought I was going on. So I started doing my morning practice from 5 to 7, and that was like my committed time to do my thing, journal, breath work, yoga, sit with music, and just vibe out sometimes. And I did that every single day, so much so that I would naturally wake up after about 2 or 3 months. I would just blink my eyes open at 5 a.m. looking forward to come to this office and do the work because I knew every single time I did it, I had a great day. Like I literally was like, whew, this is a new way of being. This is a new way of living. And I did it every day. And then I started to literally like want to be in this office doing my work before the world woke up
That's
because
awesome.
it was this pride in myself. Like it's still dark outside. I'm coming out to this office. I'm doing my yoga. I'm doing my meditation. I'm doing my breath work. And I know that by the time 7 o'clock rolls around, I'm like full. My cup
Oh,
is full. I am whole. I am centered. I am balanced. And I've done that every single day for 3 years. And I tell people, like when I coach people, I'm not going to be like, okay, get a
oh,
morning practice and do it every single day. I don't tell people that. I tell people, find one thing that fills your cup. One thing. Find a time. Doesn't have to be morning. Not everyone's going to be a morning person. But one thing to fill your cup. Start small. It could be literally, maybe you get home from work and you're stressed. And the anxiety of going into the house because you're going to have a bunch of kids screaming and yelling. And this shit's true. Parents don't admit it, but it's true. So many moms and dads sit in their car before they go into the house and go like,
oh, yeah.
right? And people don't admit that shit, but it's true. So
Yeah,
if
I
that's
mean,
the
I'm not
case,
even a parent, and I already know it's true. I mean, my niece,
so
I live at home with my niece, and like sometimes I do that before I come in.
yeah,
It's
so
like my niece
it's
is
true.
about to
So
tell me
like,
all about her day.
so
Yeah,
find that time. Like it could be like a practice could be you drive home from work and you sit in your driveway for 10 minutes, 10 intentional minutes to do some breathing, or maybe even less, 5 minutes just to jamming out to your favorite song and
yeah,
not worrying about what's inside the house, not worrying about your job, but clearly just sitting in your own worthiness because you are worthy of that
yeah.
time. You are worthy to be able to sit and look inward and hold yourself and give yourself that grace you need. Because when we come from one stressful situation like work to another stressful situation like 5 o'clock on a Wednesday night and you got to get dinner ready, you got to get your kids' homework done, you got to get your clothes
Yeah.
ready for the next day. That's a lot of stuff. We often forget that we're humans and all of this bullshit around us doesn't matter. Like we need to take care of our systems. We need to be regulated.
Yeah.
So I always suggest like find one daily practice you can do
Yeah.
to bring yourself back to center. And it's a process. You're not going to just meditate the first day and be like, ooh, I feel so centered. It's a
Yes.
practice
Yeah.
of consistently doing something the same way that works for you. And when it needs to shift, trusting your intuition. Like I started off doing certain modalities and certain techniques that were taught by, spiritual healers and therapists and gurus and all that stuff. And I've learned that I do a little bit of what they tell me, and then I intuitively start to feel what works for me.
Yeah.
So when I do breath work, I do some very intuitive breath work. When I do body movement, it's very intuitive because now it's like, now I take away the pressure of trying to do it wrong. Imagine when you look and you get a YouTube video of yoga and you're doing your poses and you're looking up at the screen like, oh shit, am I doing it right? Am I, like,
Yeah. It makes
take
you
that
want to quit
away,
like
take that
after the
stuff
first
away.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're making
Yeah.
this shit up as you go along and you trust in yourself, then you really learn how to trust yourself. And in that trust, you trust yourself that you can show up whole for your kids. You can show up as a better person for everyone you interact with, right? Because you're waking up, starting your day with the way you want to start it, rather than let me try to fit into this box and see if I can do it this way. Because
Oh,
healing,
yeah.
there's no one right way to heal. It's thousands of ways to get there, millions of ways to get there, if any, and you find what works for you. And I have the experience of my lived experience, the educational background and all that stuff to provide some guidance because it's not as easy as just like taking some breaths and regulating your nervous system. There's a process to it. And in that process, a lot of times trauma comes up, and that's where the trauma informed piece comes from, is we have to recognize that the traumas that we've experienced affect us to this day. They live in our body. They come up in triggers. A lot of times people live their whole life from a state of a trigger, a trauma response. It could be like a people pleaser is living from a fawn
Oh,
response.
yes.
They're just trying to make everyone happy around them so they feel safe.
Yeah.
I was stuck in fight, and it's a hard life to be stuck in fight. Believe me, it's hard. I was stuck. Anyone like I didn't fight with my fist as an adult, but I've been kicked out of therapist's office, and I look back, I'm
Yeah.
like, man, those therapists sucked. Those therapists were
Actually, I want you to share that,
uneducated.
but because I saw that podcast and I was like, oh my God, this is like really, really good. And I love all your videos. And one of the things that actually I wanted to bring up too that I really resonated with, which was so interesting because I'm a woman, right? And you guys were talking about crying.
Yeah.
And this idea of like, we can't cry, you have to be a man. And like, and you mentioned how you didn't cry in your 20s and your 30s. And I think it was in your 30s, I think, late 30s or late 20s when you let
Mid
yourself,
30s, mid 30s. Yeah,
right?
mid 30s is when I felt all my feels and it fucking hurt and it was scary and I just had to get through it. And crying was help me get through it.
Yeah. But I totally resonated with that because growing up for me, it was the same exact upbringing of my dad being like that masculine, macho, like hardcore Mexican saying, why are you crying? There's no reason for you to
Mm-hmm.
cry. And I think my mom was kind of raised the same way because it was the same thing. Like both parents telling me that growing up, and to this day, I still struggle with it. You know, like I had an incident yesterday where I almost wanted to cry at BJ's, and I'm like, nope, gotta hold it together. You know, and it's like, how did you get to the point where you let yourself be in that space, but also in the process of allowing yourself to cry, right? Like when you felt the
It,
resistance or when you felt like you had to hold it in, what did you say to yourself or what did you do? Because it's been work for me too, like with my therapist, where yes, like I'll
yeah,
cry and I'll cry with her and I'll cry by myself, but it's still work to,
it's definitely work.
you know?
And I'm very lucky and very blessed. And I've never had a problem asking for help. Partly
Uh,
because I spent most of my life trying to hold it together. And, you know, growing up and having suicidal ideation off and on for my whole life, like I recognized when it got really bad, I needed help.
yeah,
So that was the first step is recognizing I needed the help because I didn't have access to the feelings that I needed to heal. You know, not want to say feelings I needed to heal, but I needed access to feel certain things so that I can heal those things, right? So for me,
uh,
I actually took time off of work because I was so dysregulated in my therapy. I was like, I'm gonna heal my brain, and I didn't know it was in my
which, by
heart
the
yet.
way, like I find it, which, by the way, like I find it so courageous. And I
Yeah,
wish jobs or like there was something in place where people could take days off, months off to work on
yeah,
themselves like this. You
and
know, and
it's
sometimes we're blessed to be able to, and sometimes, like you said, like you have families, and it seems like you can't.
yeah,
I always feel like
it's a
there's a
lot of
way, but
pressure. It's
yeah,
definitely a lot of pressure, and so for me, like accessing me being able to cry and feel my feelings. So I was in this like IOP program, intensive outpatient mental health program, and I was in a lot of groups, a lot of group therapy. And I went in there like I know what the fuck I'm doing. Like I work in this field, I've facilitated these groups, you know. And then at some point I was like, drop the mask, Alex, drop it. Like you're here. Like this is now or never, right? And I just let myself feel. And when I started to feel, I started to cry in these groups and like completely dysregulated, like almost to the point where I was like, what is going on in my body? Like I'm shaking, right? And I had the intellectualized knowledge to be like, okay, I understand. I'm just crying and it's my nervous system, blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
But the power in that is I was being witnessed. The power in it was that I had community. I had people that were going through similar stuff in their own mental health journeys, right?
yeah,
And I just felt the power in being witnessed. Like, wow, these people can relate. And the people that saw me that couldn't cry yet were like, they'd come up to me like, Alex, like, thank you for that. I needed that. I'm like, what the fuck? I was just crying like a little baby. And I
but it's like you
realized that
open,
I was feeling good.
yeah,
I opened my heart. All these feelings started coming out. So then that became part of like a practice that I wouldn't run from. If I meditated and feelings came up and I started crying, I let them. And what I found is on the other side of that crying, especially in my meditative state, was bliss. Was the feeling of being whole. Was the feeling of was literally being held by the universe, saying, "You're okay. You got this." And I realized how powerful that was because in my childhood, you know, like I had a loving mother, but I also grew up around a lot of chaos. And I think
yeah.
my mom's even on this, you know. Hi, mom. Um, you know, but she
We
also
love you,
did a lot
mom.
of stuff that wasn't really conducive to uh, supporting a child's social emotional growth, right?
Yeah,
And so I realized I had the ability to hold myself, and I would cry and I would feel these feelings like it felt like I was a scared child and I was like in this office like, can I
mm,
get through this? Like what's going to happen? And these feelings come up so strong. They
yeah,
literally feel like they're going to kill me, like literally filled in my body. And I know I'm a lot more intense because I have like, you know, the diagnosis of PTSD and all this stuff. And this is not the way for everyone, but for me, it was so intense because I spent my whole life suppressing this
yeah,
ability to feel deeply because I was angry at everything. And I'm not a bad person. I've always had a good heart, but on top was this anger because I just didn't get this opportunity as a child to cry and to feel like I was held, you know?
Yeah.
So when I realized that if I can sit with this feeling, if I can sit with this crying if it comes up, I would hold myself and I would tell myself I'm safe. And it was like this
Mhm.
beautiful feeling when I was done on the other side. I was like, whoa, I feel lighter. I feel whole. I feel as if
Yeah.
I feel like I can like actually be a good dad. And then that started going like, whoa, I feel like I can be a good dad. And then I started to
Aw.
fall in love with myself. And it's quite literal. Like I'm doing this work. I'm showing up for myself every day. I'm giving myself the hug that I need. I'm working through these childhood traumas and supporting myself. And I want to shout out to my mom because even though my mom did abuse me when I was a child and we went through that and we've talked about it and we've healed our relationship because she witnessed her son, you know, at 36, 37 years old going through these tough times and she kept showing up for me.
That's so sweet.
Even though when I
So
was a
sweet.
kid, she didn't know any better, but she showed up for me. So that was a very big part of my healing journey too. Because like when I would cry, she would be there to hug me, and I was like, okay. So I've been able to access this. I've been able to hold myself. I've been able to learn that I have what it takes inside myself to hold myself and keep myself safe. And now my mom has seen the work I'm doing and realizing it takes some healing, and she's healing. And I tell her like, Mom, you tried so hard to break the generational cycles of abuse, and you did it. Like I am it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like I feel like I've been crying right now because it takes that work. And I could have easily hated my mom for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't have done me
Oh,
good. It
yeah.
wouldn't have done my daughter good. And
You
my
just,
mom's on her own healing journey
feel like
too.
you just create more of it. I think, from my own experience with my own therapist and doing the work with parents, there's a part where, yes, like there's frustration and there's anger, but then there's also like forgiveness and like acceptance
Yeah,
of, oh, they were trying their best the way that they could. And because even for my own mom, right, like she was trying to break the cycle by not beating us. Like her mom beat her and like this whole crazy, like it's like torture in Mexico, and she tried her best to not hit us and she didn't. Like it wasn't like the way that she was raised or hit, but yet there was like that lack of affection or, like don't
yeah,
cry. And it's that, oh, like that was your best that you could from what you grew up. And there's like
yeah,
forgiveness and acceptance. And I love how you're saying that once you connect with yourself and you give yourself that, when you show up to the world, they give it to you too. Because
yeah.
just like you're talking about, like your mom, I've had like therapy sessions where I'm like, oh, my mom would never listen to that. Or like, I don't think she's open enough. And my therapist would be like, well, why don't you try? And I would try it and it would come back and I'm like, oh my God, this is a whole different mom than when I was like 10 years old, And there's this
Age
also
does
like
that to you.
perspective of like they're
Yeah,
going through their own changes in life. They're also growing in their own way. And I try to look at the blessings of, okay, it's not maybe like what I want, like these full on deep conversations about like healing or going back, but it's like, oh, she's sitting with me and she's giving me space to talk and vent.
yeah.
And like that's a blessing within itself, you know?
And it
Yeah.
takes work to get to a place where you can see your parents as just people that were learning as they went along, right? Like we forget that when we're growing up, we're watching our parents grow up. Like,
Yeah.
and for me as a child, I was very hyper aware of all the abuse that was around me. And I feel like, Bruno, the character from Encanto, like I was calling
Oh.
out bullshit since I was 5 years old. Like, hey, you can't do this. You're an adult. Like, I'm a kid. Treat me kindly, And like,
Yeah.
because I was talking back to Latino parents, that just,
It's not a
caused me to get
it's not
smacked up more,
allowed.
Yeah.
It's
So
I
like
was
this
telling
has
one of
always
my
been in me. Yeah.
I was telling one of my friends the other day, I was like, oh yeah, growing up my voice wasn't allowed. Like I spoke up and boom, It's like,
Yeah.
nope, not allowed. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been a wild ride for me, and I just recognize all of the blessings that come along the way for me, and have really, it's the perfect storm, right? Like I've been through shit. I've been through storms that felt like it was going to completely wreck me, and I've always got out on the other side. And when I get out the other side, it wasn't as if I was like, oh, I have all these new tools. It was like I just got out on the other side, like disheveled, and like, huh, I made it. And then once I got my breath, I was like, okay, let's unpack what I went through and let's kind of rebuild. And I did that. I did that every single day, every single time I had challenges. I did that and I reflected. And my reflective practice, I've done this with people in like the social service field and stuff and the maternal mental health. Like I've provided these reflective coaching services to staff. And essentially I took all of that stuff and I did it with myself. And I realized like, okay, it's way too big for a system. Like I'm not going to just be in a social service or therapist or something. It's way too big. There's so much more that's encompassing my health, my mental health, my well-being. And I just kind of figured out what worked for me. And everything kind of just fell into place. And like you said, when you show up for yourself and you have this love and you put it out there, it comes back to you. And I know that sounds kind of like a little frou-frou and like
No,
kooky and stuff, but
no,
no, it's
it's like
true.
I
Like
feel like it's
if you
universal
emanate
truth.
love, it's a universal truth. And I know I don't want to be an ableist because I know people go through trauma and not everyone's gonna have those opportunities to have these, like, shit, I'm so blessed. I took 3 months off of work to heal. Like, that doesn't happen, but I was able to have that. And there's people that don't have it. So the people that don't have that luxury, like, I'm creating content. When I create that content, I'm speaking to myself because I know parents out there are in it, like they're in the shit and they're looking for some kind of like encouragement because
Yeah.
no one's going to admit like, yeah, I pulled in today from my work and I sat in my car for 10 minutes gripping my steering wheel going, I got to go in for, and
Or even,
like that happens.
or even, like I'm pretty sure. Again, I'm not a parent, but I'm assuming too that there's some parents that just wake up and be like, you know what, today I don't want to be a mom, but I have to show up. Or like today I don't want to be a dad and I have to show up. And they have to kind of pull the energy from where they can to kind of show up.
Yeah. And those days make you feel like shit, no matter how much you show up for your kid. But when you feel like you don't want to and you're there, it's a spiral. You feel like,
Absolutely.
why am I not enjoying this parenthood more? Why am I not connecting deeply with my kid? Why am I feeling like it's work to show up and play with my kid? For me, I'll speak for myself. That's how it felt for me. And I had to learn to accept those parts of me. I had to learn to unpack why were these feelings coming up? I had to learn how to then be different. And that's the hard part is, okay, so for me, it was hard. And I had thousands of hours of trainings on how to be a parent educator, how to, navigate
Yeah.
early childhood development. Like, I know all of that stuff. And it was hard for me. So that's why I'm here is like, I know parents want to be the best version of themselves. And I know if they're struggling, it's hard to ask for help. And when you want to change, what next?
Yeah.
That's that what next is really important.
Yeah. There's two things that I want to ask you, and it's from one of our conversations, but also from the podcast that I heard, right? And because you talked
Mhm.
on feelings and you mentioned how you're no longer afraid of feeling because you're kind of like, I felt it and I'm now like, bring it on because I'm not going to die
Yeah.
from feeling.
Yeah.
I know you sent that voice memo and I was like, oh, that's so good. But the other one too that like popped for me is how vulnerability saved you. So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about those two comments that you've made because
Yes.
it kind of brings
So being
it.
vulnerable,
Yeah.
I think being vulnerable comes easy to me because I've sat with myself and I've gone through my own shadows, my own past, my own traumas,
Well,
and I know it's my story.
I have a
Yeah.
question to you. Like, what does vulnerability mean to you?
Sure. Vulnerability means to me is being able to show up authentically as yourself and not worry about what people are going to think of you or judge you. And oftentimes we hide those parts that need to be seen. We hide those parts that need to be witnessed in order to heal or to move through. And a person can get stuck in hiding that their whole life. And being
Yeah.
vulnerable is scary because we haven't seen those parts. We haven't dealt with those parts. So why would we want to show them to someone?
Yeah.
Um, so it saved me in the sense where I was able to show the parts that were struggling, the parts that I was ashamed of, the parts that I was just, I felt despair around, like, oh man, this is me. This is, I guess this is my life. I'm just going to live this way my whole life, right? And
Yeah.
once I started sharing that, people started saying, you feel like that too? I felt like that too. And then I started surrounding
Yeah.
myself with people that have been through it who are like, oh, I was like that. I'm not like that anymore. And I was like, what? Nah, you can't change that much. 3 years later, here I am. And
Yeah.
it's insane because it all started with, literally, it all started with being able to open up and cry deep, deep tears from childhood traumas in front of a group of, I would say they weren't strangers, but a group of people that were going through their shit in a support group. And once I accessed that, I was like, whoa, like it was intense to go through, scary as hell. Felt like I was gonna die, shaking, feeling all cold. Like it's intense, man. Nervous
I
system
could
shit, super
totally
intense.
imagine. Totally
so,
imagine.
so,
Yeah.
so once I was over that, I was like, this is a completely different feeling in my body that I've never experienced. And that feeling was worth
Yeah.
going at those vulnerabilities, those fears I had. It was worth it. It was worth
Yeah.
to get to the other side, to get to the other side of those feelings. Because quite literally, the feelings that I felt coming up from my traumas felt like they were going to kill me, physically kill me, like tension in
Yeah.
my body,
And
stomach
they
in
do, right?
knots.
I mean, not that they do, but it's like that trauma that you have in your body that you hold in your body do eventually come through and they manifest in some other way in your body, right? Like
Yes, they do.
diseases, stress, anxiety, depression, like it comes through, it shows up.
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm 39 years old, and my body is healing, right? It's healing at a cellular level because I
Yeah.
do this stuff, and I have faith that I'm healing, and I face my traumas. And I'm not telling everyone to go out there and sit in silence and look at your traumas and unpack them. That shit's intense. And if you ever do that, make sure you have support from a therapist.
Somebody with you.
But it
Yeah.
was something. It was something that just let me know that no matter how hard it feels, that I'm capable of getting through it, and that's such a powerful feeling to know that I've gone through the depths of my soul. And I say this because I have very intense emotions. And I think, looking back at my childhood, I've experienced every single emotion on the spectrum of human emotion by the time I was age 5. I grew up in abuse. I grew up in witnessing DV. I grew up in witnessing violence, moving around, getting kicked out of schools. Like, poverty, like I witnessed all this stuff, and for a 5-year-old to process all this stuff is impossible without an adult next to them to let them know they're safe. Ideally, we would want an adult around that kid to kind of shield them from those, these horrors of the world. But I experienced all of those huge emotions in my body by the time I was 5 years old. And at 6 years old, I'm sure I was like, fuck this. I'm just going to be angry. This one's an easy feeling to do. This is the angry feeling I see around my house. So I'm just going to be this way instead of feeling the sadness, feeling the hurt, So now I know that, like, I have access to all those feelings. And now I'm a grown man that is intelligent enough and aware enough in my body to feel somatically where these tensions are coming, how I can release them through breath work, through meditation, through yoga, through plant medicine. Like, there's so many different ways. And for me, it started off as like, you need to do this work or you will die. And then now it turned into like, I'm going to continue to do this work because I'm like, I love myself. And if I do this work, it's for my daughter. It's not just for me, it's for my daughter.
That's so
and it's
sweet.
for anyone I interact with, right? It's just, if I show up whole, then I'm going to bring my full self, my authentic self in any space I come into. Some people might be like, I don't know about that guy's a weirdo. Some people will be like, holy shit, Alex is a really great guy. And the people that think I'm a weirdo, I don't really care because, like, yeah,
You're a wacko.
yeah, it's
so we're all gonna be wackos
like,
together.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here, let me see the comments. Do any of you guys have any questions so far for Alex? Let me see. Is creative comadre your mom?
No, she's my creative business coach. I've been very lucky to connect with her, and she's helping me kind of strategize and build a brand. And I didn't know I had to build a brand. I was just on the, shooting reels, talking about my feelings and how you can help kids, right? So very lucky she reached out to me. She was inspired by my content, and she's really coaching me through launching this business correctly with some nice strategy. And it's cool to say I have a lot of stuff in the works with her, and she's really supporting me through it. So, like I said, you put that love out there, love comes back. Like, my message is not this message where it's scripted. I'm straight from the heart, and that's how it is. And she saw it.
Raw.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Shout out to her. The Modern Rocario. Did I say that right?
Yeah, he's a good guy from Latino Dad Connection. So he said, I thought Alex was a big weirdo when I first met him in person. My respect to him. Now he knows I admire him. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you.
He also said
he's doing some amazing work too.
He said, I can relate to that. I no longer hold grudges towards them. I think we're talking about parents. It took me a while also to see my parents as humans and not as my parents. Yeah. That's awesome. Cool. Okay, I just wanted to go through the comments and I read them out loud. But is there anything else that you would love to share? I mean, I can ask more questions. I have so many questions for you.
You can ask more questions. If there's questions coming in, I'm happy to answer. I'm an open book. I have no problem.
Because there's like 2 other questions that I would love to bring up. So one is, and you can totally say no, right? Like, you said plant medicine.
Yep.
So it's like, how have that medicine, how has that helped you? And the other question that I have for you, or maybe one at a time. Maybe we'll do one at a time.
Okay, so for plant medicine, it's funny because I'm over here like, who's watching? Like, this shit, Because I worked in the system. I worked at a nonprofit that was funded by LA County. It's okay. I'm okay because I'm stepping out of that system. I'm much bigger than that system. Okay. So yeah, cannabis. Cannabis is a fucking saving grace. I have PTSD. Cannabis is a known medicine to help people heal, right? And there's several different ways you can use cannabis. You can smoke a whole lot, numb, and vibe out, and just be okay with being high all day. I used it intentionally. I used it to enhance my meditation, my meditative states. I used it to really identify some of the physical symptoms I was feeling in my PTSD
See all those
and
hearts?
use it with intention.
Look at all those
Yeah.
hearts.
So it's silly, man. It's legal. It's a silly thing. We come from a time where it's like, oh shit, weed, but it's a
I mean, it's
powerful
still in the back
medicine.
of our mind, though, right? Like, I think I
Yeah.
told you, like I'm at home and I do these things, and I'm like, oh my god, my mom's gonna come in and she's gonna kick me out, and it's like yeah.
So that's a big piece that has been part of my healing journey, and it allowed me to go deep into those emotions, and it gave me a little bit of guidance in the sense where I turned to this as a sacred medicine that showed me I was safe, because this plant, like, she had me when I was going into these deep memories and these deep traumas, and on the other side I was always been able to be gently held through these, right? And that was through a developed practice where every once in a while I would sit with cannabis and do breath work, because it would intensify. And for me, I'm very intense. Don't do this, people. I mean, you can let me know and I'll help you through it. But I'm very intense. So like my nervous system lived on this in this state of fight. So it was very intense. So I've been in my meditative practice, I'm like, all right, let's do breath work. I'm gonna do the Wim Hof method, like super fast and intense. And I learned that I have to take it gentle. I learned that I have to give myself grace, and cannabis kind of held my hand through that. And it took me to places in my psyche to be able to pull from my lived experiences and my traumas to recognize, like, hey, it's not your fault. You're safe. And I say that because cannabis has given me a tool to say I'm safe. And before, I would never believe it. I would be like affirmations. I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm like, no, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. What's going on? Well, what's going on is that little kid that lives inside me that wasn't safe doesn't know how to access that safety. And this adult never learned how to access this safety. So then when I learned how to do it, I was able to really believe, because cannabis was like, okay, I'm going to just chill your body out for a second. Now you can meditate, get into this deep state where you feel safe. And then I was like, oh, I'm safe. I'm also high, but I'm safe. Okay, cool. I'm good with it right now, right?
2 in 1.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so then this high that turned, like, before I used with intention, it was like, okay, let me just smoke a lot of weed and watch music videos, and draw. Yeah. And I still do that, but I also use it with intention. And it's very powerful. So I'm like opening up and saying this. This is a piece of my experience that I've kind of kept under wraps because of the stigma around it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm okay to open up now, because I really believe that it's powerful medicine. There's nothing to be ashamed about it. If you're a parent that smokes weed because your kids stress you out, all right, good for you. Like, do it with intention. Judgment. If it helps you out,
there's no judgment.
It's that's
how I feel about like psychedelics. About like being open with it and just sharing. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know I have one more question, but I don't know if we're running out of time, because the other question that I had for you had to do with, because about the attachment with mothers, right? And I wanted to pick your brain about, like, what is it that or how important is that attachment with the mom? And that can totally be for a whole other tea time.
Yeah, but it could be hours, but yeah. So I worked in maternal mental health programs. So I supervised, and I was actually a home visitor at one point in my career, working with new moms and their new babies. And we would go into the house and kind of essentially provide parent coaching or parent support, where we would kind of show them activities on how to connect with their child, how to build that attachment, like basically how to meet their needs, how to read their cues, how to recognize that, a little 2-year-old's not trying to piss you off and manipulate you. Like, that doesn't happen, right? Like, you can't spoil your newborn baby by picking them up too much. Like, all of these things. I've worked with parents that have literally told me, like, oh, I'm going to start playing with them when they're 1. And I'm like, okay, no judgment. All right. Well, let me give you some information. Like, let me show you some things that you can do to interact with your kid right now at 4 days old. What? I can interact with my kid at 4 days old? Yeah, you can do some things to build closeness and bonding. It could be skin to skin. It could be, working with, certain toys on trying to get eye gazing and interacting. Like, it could just be, eye gazing at them and, mimicking their facial expression. There's so much you can do to attach to your kid and build that secure attachment. And nobody teaches this shit. Nobody does, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yes. Which is crazy.
So I was out in these programs doing it.
because I got this job, right? And one of the trainings that we had, I think it was like a group training, and they were showing us videos of how infants and how they connect to their moms and how the way that they communicate is like they pick up their facial expressions, like the mom and the dad, and like that's how they try to communicate. And I was like, oh, that's so crazy. And I kind of got into it a little bit when I was learning more about my own trauma of like being given up when I was a kid. But it's like, oh yeah, it's so interesting to me. So that's why I wanted to like ask you about it. But you're right, like people don't teach it, and it's so important because there's a video that we saw, and it happens now, I think, more often than we think, where mothers are just on their phones and their baby is like on their hand, and the other hand is, or one of the babies on, one of their arms, and the other hand's like on their phone. And we saw this video where the baby was like looking for the facial expression, and the mom's just like totally no emotion on the phone, just scrolling. But it's like those little things, you think that it just has like huge effects, right?
They
And you
do.
don't
They
know.
really do.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. Super interesting. Yeah.
So like the goal of me is to support parents to kind of get to that secure attachment, because a lot of us don't have a secure attachment growing up. We have anxious, avoidant, disorganized. I was disorganized because I had a very loving mom, but a mom that used to, let her adult stressors be taken out of me, right? So like I wouldn't know if it was safe or not. I wouldn't know if it was safe to come in and be loved, or safe or come in to be quiet. Or sometimes I developed the persona of being a funny guy because I had to shift the room. Like, well, if I can make everyone laugh, everyone's gonna be happy, right?
Yeah.
So we have to work on building those attachments, and not all of us know how to, because we don't have those examples. If we don't have a secure attachment to our parents growing up, it's almost crazy to think that I'm going to expect someone to just know how to do it. Sure, there's books and resources. We can read it, but we have to feel it and live it and actually breathe what we're doing, right? We have to learn how to be different, not just read books, put the knowledge in our head and move on with our day, right? And so that's what I did in that maternal mental health field. And I worked with, anywhere from mothers that were sorry, I'm trying to turn the light up back. Mothers that were pregnant still, to mothers that were just newborns, and I would work with them literally 2-3 days after they got back from the hospital. So it was a really cool learning experience
That's
for
awesome.
me. And while I was doing this, I had my 3-year-old at home. I had my 2-year-old at home.
Oh, so you
So
got
I'm
to
learning
learn and
along the
also live
lines.
it.
And
Yeah.
and so this is the part where I was telling you, going back just to give you an idea, kind of the time frame. Like this is when I had all the knowledge up here. I was able to speak on it and teach it. But when I went back home, I was like, why is this not working? I teach these strategies, right? And the reality of it is I didn't have a secure attachment, and I didn't know what a secure attachment looked like. So even like me trying to reach for my daughter, to reach for connection, I was not able to read her cues correctly because her attachment wasn't secure, because she witnessed me and, her mother that didn't have these secure attachments. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it kind of made it so that when I wanted to connect with my daughter, there was a lot of disconnect. And I had to figure out how I can show up in a space where I'm safe and I'm secure. And that's what this practice has done for me, with just finding that security within myself so I can show up. And I do a lot of nervous system regulation, because nobody wants to be securely attached to somebody that's all whacked out on the nervous system, dysregulated, right? So like I have to show up regulated so that she feels safe enough to want to look to me for secure attachment. If I wasn't, kids will look to their parents regardless of how they're being treated. Kids will look to their parents and look for comfort regardless of how that parent treats them.
Yeah.
Always seeking and yearning for that deep connection and that secure attachment. But kids aren't going to be like, I want a secure attachment with my mom. It's just going to be like, no, I want my mommy to take care of me, and my mommy is not always there for me, paying attention.
Yeah.
And okay, so this is what a secure attachment looks like. This is what a safe relationship looks like. It doesn't feel safe, but it's supposed to. So that those patterns
It's also
happen
that,
over and over in life.
even like that part with kids too, it's like they think it's normal at some point. I mean, we thought it was normal at some point,
Yeah.
right? And then we get older and you learn, or like the school, right? Just experiences, personal experiences that we learn, like I feel unsafe, or I feel off, or why am I feeling this way? Like you start to get curious and reflective, and you realize that there's like a whole other way that you didn't even know before, right?
Yeah.
So
You see that there's a way, but it's hard sometimes to imagine that way is actually manageable and doable, right? Like I wanted to change. I had to do the work to get here. And I spent 15 years trying to change, 10 years trying to change. And then like one day I was like, okay, this is do or die. And I changed. But yeah, nobody gives you a manual, right? Nobody gives you instructions on how to do it. I just happened to have the perfect storm that has given me all the information, all the knowledge, all of the lived experience. Even my mom, as much as like I talk about her and like people probably, dang, her mom must have been mean, and she was mean. But you know, like even in that, like she's a healer herself. You know, like she had her traumas, and like she was the lady that people would come to in the neighborhood. Like she was like a healer. Like people would sit with her and she would read their tarot cards, and she would like, you know, she was a healer, and she was a wounded healer, and like much like myself, I see that and pull from those and go, thank you, mom, for showing me that. Like it was a little confusing to me because I'm like, oh, here's my mom helping, you know,
But
someone
then at home,
in their healing
it's
journey at
totally
the same
different.
time. She's yelling at me to turn the TV off and going crazy.
So different.
So like I know that this lives in me. I know that this is my purpose. You know, like many people, like coaches, like, oh, I'll help you find your purpose. Like I didn't need a coach to find my purpose. I just lived it. I lived it from my heart from day one.
Yeah.
And once I became connected from my brain to my heart, I was like, whoa, this is intense. I worked in nonprofits in a helping profession for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'm an angry person. Why did I work in nonprofits helping people when I had all this anger in me? Because the anger was not me. My heart was always pulling me in the right direction. And I had a lot of hard times being angry in these nonprofit settings because I was like, the urgency of helping families was so intense that I was constantly in a trauma response. Like, we have to help these families. Like, no kid deserves to get beat. Like, let's do something about it.
Yeah.
Now I know, like, well, of course I was being driven on my passion and my purpose, but I was stuck in a system that was so broken.
Yeah.
And I think this would be a good transition to your next question. I think you mentioned you want to talk about like compassion fatigue, right? And all that.
Yes, I do. Tell me what that means. Well, because
right,
okay, yes. But before actually we move on to that, because I wanted to share to you, I read this book called A Course in Miracles, and I love that book, and I read it, and I haven't finished it, but it talks about how when we're teachers, we're also students. And even before I started doing like my life coaching business and all that stuff, it was always a reminder of like, okay, I'm a teacher, but I'm also a student. And it's crazy how it happens, because even when I wasn't aware of it, I would show up and there was something for me to be learned, or there was something for me to learn about. And it's crazy how that works too. And we're also in this field of teaching and leading and guiding, where at the same time, like the clients, the students, are the kids, like they're teaching us something, which is super cool.
Yeah.
But
yeah, definitely.
Going to the compassion fatigue, I'm so curious to hear what you have to say about that in the social work, because I've done the training, you know, like the self-care and, you know, take care of yourself. And I've also talked to somebody else on a tea time where they were talking about like compassion fatigue and how they're also not in the work anymore because of it. But you explained or shared like compassion exploitation. I may say that wrong, but yeah.
Well, it's definitely so like I worked in this field for 10 years in nonprofits, social services, maternal mental health, early childhood education, because it was my passion. It was my passion to help families. It was my passion to break cycles. And when I say break cycles, back then I didn't recognize it was so deep. I didn't recognize it was in our body. I didn't recognize it was somatically expressed in trauma responses. I just was like, I don't want kids to be beat. I don't want kids to have abuse. I don't want kids to ever feel the way I felt, right? So it was my passion. It was my purpose. And I fell into a career where I started working with families, and I worked for many nonprofits, a couple nonprofits here and there. And every once in a while, they would send us to trainings called compassion fatigue. And they'd be like, oh, you work with these families in crisis. Well, go to this training so you can learn how to take care of yourself so that you're not getting vicarious trauma put onto you by these families, because it's your fault. You're feeling compassion fatigue because you're not good enough. And that rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm like, no, motherfucker, can I cuss?
Yes,
I was like, no, motherfucker.
Yes,
It's like, no, it's not compassion fatigue. What's happening in these systems? And I worked for wonderful nonprofits with great leadership, but the system is broken. It's not set up to support the frontline staff that are doing the on-the-ground work, working with these families, day-to-day, families in crisis. And there's a good chance that the people that work with them have traumas that are so deep that they're processing them as they go, or not processing, but experiencing not vicarious trauma, but trauma responses from their own lived experiences, right? People that work in social services, there's a good chance they come from trauma because it's so close to their heart. So when we start getting overwhelmed and when we start feeling too much fall on top of us because we're working with families that are going through DV, getting kids taken away from DCFS, and when we live in a world that those are our experiences as children, do you think as adults we're going to be able to support them and get them through that without feeling our feelings.
Well,
So they send us to compassion fatigue trainings and go, oh, just learn how to self-care. Go take a bath, read a book, go for a walk. That's not self-care. I mean, sure it is, but it's not going to fix the traumas.
But there's also like I feel like there's a distinction, because what you're saying, or what I'm hearing, is the people who are showing up to do this work, it's like they're getting re-triggered working with families or with children who are going through their traumas, and they're getting re-triggered, and rather than processing it or going back home and processing it and talking about it with their own therapist, it's like the company is saying, go take a bath, come back tomorrow.
Yeah. Here's this little nice care package with, candles and lotion.
Yeah.
And it's something that I feel that is used to keep these nonprofits going, because you get these entry-level positions. They don't pay well because they're contracts that are required to pay a certain amount. Like, there's not money in nonprofits, right? Mm-hmm. And these people have hearts of gold and they want to help. And when we just get triggered, and so like part of my career, I fell into this thing called reflective supervision, where I would literally sit for 2 hours a week, like 2 hours a week with my staff. And I would say, okay, let's talk about the families you're working with. What's coming up? Oh, I'm working with this family in domestic violence. And, I just felt strange. Okay, well, what are you feeling? It's not therapy. I'm not trying to let them talk about their childhood trauma. I mean, if they wanted to, I would listen, but I'm not trying to heal their traumas. I'm just letting them know how I can provide them some support to ask these reflective questions. Like, yeah, for some reason I walked into this house and the dad was here and he was accused of DV, and like I just felt really like, I don't know, I wasn't able to connect with the mom that day. All right, well, what's going on? And I ask questions, powerful questions that lead them to being able to, oh wow, the thing I witnessed at 4 years old. Oh man, when I walked into that house as a 30-some-year-old staff person, social worker, I was feeling like that fear of a 4-year-old. Not many people want to go there. Not many people acknowledge it. But when you recognize it, that's that reflective supervision. Then that's how you take care of yourself. That's how you don't allow yourself to fall into this burnout, right? Because you're not just shoving things down. So compassion fatigue, these trainings are, oh, your staff's feeling burnt out. Send them into compassion fatigue. And it's like, no, like nonprofits, stop just exploiting people's passions.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to have endless amounts of staff that are going to be like, oh, I'll work for peanuts because I'm so passionate about this work, helping families. Yeah. And it just broke my heart. It broke my heart. I mean, that system almost broke me. Like, that system almost broke me. I'm over here, like, fighting for my life in my personal life, going through my own struggles, being triggered daily by the stuff I'm taking in, having suicidal ideations, going through trainings on how to deal with suicidal ideations when I'm hiding parts of myself. But man, I had to show up in this stupid little polo shirt and sit here and sit through this training and act like I don't have a life, act like my life doesn't matter. And then I tell them, oh, I'm a little stressed out. Oh, here's this little bubble bath. Here, we got this compassion fatigue kit for you. It's like, fuck you, man. So.
Okay, so I have a question with that too. It's like, what would be, I guess, like the best case scenario, or a way where, I don't want to say it could get fixed, but a way where you put, I guess, like the worker's priority, or where they don't have to be like re-triggered every time. Yeah. Like, what would be like, I guess.
So like, that's the reflective supervision. So the reflective supervision piece is huge on there, right? And I actually do something on the side where I work in reflective praxis. So I support agencies with the mentor of mine, Diane, who offers these trainings to staff, frontline staff, directors, and managers, even board members, and we teach them the importance of like having compassion for your staff, and how do we manage productivity and humanity? How do we do that? Because humans aren't designed to work 50 hours a week in crisis situations helping families. It's not sustainable. So there's a change, and it's a movement, and it's difficult because the system of nonprofits, you can't pay your frontline staff $35 an hour, when it's entry level, like they deserve way more than that. But if we can't pay them more money, then what we can do is we can train the leadership to show up and understand their blind spots. We can go into these nonprofits and we train leadership. We actually sit through, I'm doing a training on Monday actually. We're working with the agencies that do home visiting programs and have maternal mental health. And we're saying like, look, this is hard work, and it's much more complex than just going in there and sharing them some child development information. We have to look at the intersectionalities of how we show up in this work, race, culture, ethnicity. There's so much that goes into that, right? Yeah. So there is a solution. I don't know if people are ready to hear it because it's raw It hurts. It's dysregulating. You're going to have to take people that are in positions of power to say, hey, I need you to look at what you have and how you can show up differently for the people that work for you and how you can put them first. Because if without them, those families out in the community don't get help, right?
Yeah.
So, and sometimes these agencies just, they forget the human part. They forget that the people working for them are human,
They're also humans.
with their own background, with their own trauma, with their own lives. And it's really a powerful thing when you see leadership step up and say, we want to be different. And I've worked with nonprofit leadership where I've said this, not actually before I was in this role. I was a staff, I was a manager, I was almost at a director level. And I would bring this stuff up to leadership, and they didn't want to hear it. It was too hard for them to hear, because the change it requires a lot of change, right?
Yeah.
So now I've been in spaces where I'm working with leadership that are inviting us into this space, paying us money to share our information with them so that they can be different, right?
Yeah.
So now
Which
I'm
I
like,
think it's
okay,
so
now I
awesome
have faith.
because it's like the space of like going and working at it at the core. It's like, fuck yeah, that's what we need in those companies, and not just in those companies, but like in other nonprofits, companies. We need people to reconnect with themselves and to change the way that they show up to their employees.
Yeah.
Right? With like compassion and like what you were sharing earlier, it might be like so cliche, but like with love too, and like empathy, and like taking away that mask of, I'm the boss, or I'm like the leader and I have to be this way.
I have a tattoo that says right here. Let's see if I can show it. It says "Lead with love," and I got that.
There you go.
Right as I was going
Is that
through
a heart
my.
too?
It's a heart. Lead with love, written in New Times Roman font, because I went to grad school and I was ABA or APA, all that stuff. Just like I was so intellectualized, it has a lot of meaning to me, because in that moment where I decided to make that shift, I got that tattoo back in March, right before COVID shut the world down. March 2020, I got that. And I look at it and it reminds myself that, like, in order to lead and to be a leader that people want to follow, you have to lead with love. And I'm not trying to get people to follow me. I'm just literally doing what I need to do to survive in this world in a way where I'm putting love out there, right?
Yeah.
So in the sense of these nonprofits, like, I don't know how open places would be like, oh yeah, let's talk about lead with love, but really that's what it comes down to. That word even makes people uncomfortable. Like, I can tell my homies, hey, I love you, bro. They'll be like, like it's a liberating feeling to let your love flow. Love, once you access it, it's infinite, right? There's no limit to it. So if you access it and you put it out into the world, of course, like, I'm not going to just sit here and love everyone and get taken advantage of. And honestly, if someone tried to do that with me, try. Like, I've lived a life. I've been around the block and back. I'm not just some naive kid,
But I also think there's a way where you still love, but there's boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
exactly.
You can still show up in that presence of like love and compassionate person and caring. But I think with your boundaries, like, that's the part where you don't get fucked over. You don't, get bent over backwards. You can still love with boundaries. Yeah.
Exactly. And that takes practice too, because you have to first to learn to love yourself. So cliche, and like, people have told me that my whole life, and then now I know what it means. Now I know what it feels like. Now I know what it viscerally feels like to love myself, right? And I know that I'm worth and worthy of being happy. And I know I can maintain my happiness by aligning myself with people that are similar and have similar core values. And if someone doesn't, vibe with me, doesn't hurt my feelings at all.
Okay.
So boundaries
totally
go up. I'm all good with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's I think you're on the same page, right? It's like, once you access this sense of self-love, it's okay, I have this sense of self-love. It's not going to ever run out. Like, all right, cool. Now I know I can put it out there, and the people that see that and that have that within themselves are going to be attracted to me.
Yeah.
And like, that's somewhere I'm at. And I know I'm a little, like, not every man's going to be like, oh, I want to just be as loving as Alex, because it's hard to be this vulnerable. And part of it is because I've lived life. I've been an asshole. I've been a tough guy. I've been a macho man. Like, I've done all that stupid shit. And now I'm this, right? So I'm totally fine with showing it, because I can show other men that have that heart, that want to be that scared little boy, and heal that scared little boy inside them, and just say, hey, at some point you wanted a hug and you didn't get it, and then you said, fuck the world, and you're still saying it. You made that choice as a 5 or 6 or 7 or 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to hold on to that, right? We can let love in. And in order to do that, we literally have to learn how to love ourselves. Because if you go through life
Yeah.
saying fuck the world and fighting with people, all the stuff coming back at
It's,
you is going to make you feel like shit. You're going to internalize that. You're going to think I'm not worthy. You're going to think I'm broken. Something's wrong with me. And there's nothing wrong with you. I'm talking to you. Yeah, you. Nothing wrong with you. All it is the bullshit that's been put on us. And it takes time to unpack that shit and to find it. And once you unpack it, holy shit, your love will just flow. And that love will make you fall in love with yourself. I guarantee it. It takes work. You'll get there if you try. But it's possible, right? It's possible. And if people know me, and some of the people that are supporting the most in my coaching journey are people that know me from my past lives, because they know who I was. They know that I've always been this nice person, but I always had this edge around me about like being aggressive and assertive and just reactive. And now they see me on Instagram, they're like, holy shit, who is this
who is
guy?
this
I'm like,
person?
yeah, I found
Yeah.
myself. It took me
It,
36 years to get here. I'm 39 right now, but I found
it's
myself. And when you feel this, you want to share it with the world,
You
right?
do. You totally do. And it's what you said too. It's like your passion is so much bigger than the system. Like
Mm-hmm.
your love is so much bigger than the system. Right? It's like that passion, that
Yeah.
love, that authenticity to just be in that space of like loving will come back. Right? You don't have to do anything about it. Just show up
Yeah.
consistently.
Just show up
Yeah.
and know if people don't receive your love, it's not an attack on you. It's
Yeah.
they're at where they need to be, and maybe that feeling of love might be a little dysregulated to them, right?
Yeah.
And I think I used to want people to love me, and now like I want people to love themselves.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's a funny thing. It's a funny way to shift my perspective. Like, oh, I just want people to love me. It's like, oh, like I know
It's
people love
crazy
me,
because
but I want people to love themselves.
I can totally agree. Like I can totally relate because I think for me it was like I want people to think that I'm a good person. I want people to like me and like I
Mm,
want to have connections. And now it's like the more you fill up your cup and the more you do the work, it's like, oh, I love myself so much that I don't need that validation. I don't need to be wanted. I don't need to be liked. But I want everybody to connect with themselves. Like, and the people who are ready are going to come into my space and we'll do this together. And the people who aren't will be watching from afar. But it's like my door is always open and will always be open. You know, with like my heart super green and open.
it's
Yeah.
it's a it's a space that you kind of have to learn to navigate because it's intense. Like when I accessed this love, I was like on cloud nine for months. Like, holy shit, I'm a new person, and it's a bit dysregulated. It's confusing. It's a new way of being, and then that's when the work starts. That's when you're like, okay, now I have this ability to stay in this space. How do I move through my life from a space that's heart centered?
Yeah.
Because we normally typically don't, especially men. I saw a comment saying like our culture teaches men to be tough and the strong ones. I'm gonna tell you something. Loving yourself is as strong as you can get, and we're taught that showing that we love ourselves is is not strong. Like we have to sacrifice for our families. We have to be tough. We have to just suck it up and get by. That's not loving ourselves. That's like shutting parts of us down that need to be seen, that need to be validated, that need to be heard. So I totally agree. Cultures make us seem and they make us think that we have to be tough. But if we shift and reframe our thought of what tough, strong is, like I'm tough as fuck. I'm strong as fuck. Like
Yeah.
I can look at a man and be like, they can look at me crying and be like, oh, you're a little bitch. Like, have you sat through your emotions and you realize that they can't kill you?
Yeah.
When's the last time you cried? Well, I'm crying. All right, cool. Good for you. I'm happy for you, brother. Like, if you ever want to cry, let me know. I'll be there to witness you.
Yeah.
So like that's the thing. Like, I have no problem being this version of myself, and like, I don't look at like feminine and masculine energy, but I know people do use that. Like, I have no problem being this feminine energy, right? Because I live my life, man. I've been that asshole. I've knocked fools out. Like, I know how to handle my shit, and at the same time, I'm a loving man, and that's okay.
You can have both.
Yeah, exactly. I'm both. And I still bring some of that stuff with me, like I'm not this just goofy ass dude that wants to spread love in the world. Like I'm all of my lived experiences. And those lived experiences were hard. Those lived experiences were intense. And those lived experiences taught me things.
Well, they also bring you to like where you're at now. It brings you to like
Yeah,
the here and the now and the work that you're
exactly.
doing. All right. It's like you look back and you're like, okay, on certain stuff, it's like you're like, oh, now I know why. Like that happened. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for showing up. I would love to end it on love leads the way. That's your tattoo, right?
Yes. Yep. It says lead with love.
Lead with
And it
love.
works.
Yes.
Lead with love.
How
Yeah.
can people find you?
You can follow me on Instagram, Reflective AF Coaching. That's my coaching page. My personal page is this one, Yo Soy Alex Flow. I have a website, reflectiveafcoaching.com. So those are ways you can get in contact with me. If you ever have any questions about parenting, meditation, breath work, cannabis, anything, please feel free to DM me. I am happy to help. I know the power in this healing work, and I am so looking forward to supporting men, more men on their journey.
Yeah.
I work with a few women and parents as well. So if there's anything, if you guys vibe with my, if you pick up what I'm putting down, follow me. I'm also on TikTok, which is blowing up, which is pretty fun.
Ooh.
Reflective AF on TikTok.
Okay.
That I'm a little more raw and unedited on TikTok. I have I don't have people who follow me in real life there, so it's kind of like shit. I'll just show up true. So like
That's
I don't
awesome.
have my real life people on TikTok, but it's a
Well,
cool
after
it's a cool
this, I'm gonna
platform.
start following
Yeah.
you. So.
Yeah, so I'm a little more raw on TikTok just because that's how that platform kind of goes, and I like it because I'm showing up myself and people are accepting me, people are receiving me, people are picking up the stuff I'm putting down. So Reflective AF Coaching on Instagram, Yoso Alex Flow is my personal, and TikTok Reflective AF, and my website is reflectiveafcoaching.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. We'll
Yes,
totally
thank
stay in touch.
you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
I know we planned this for like at least a couple months, right? And I'm happy it happened now because also Saturday, if you guys can tune in, Latinx Parenting Brown Fatherhood Series, I'm going to be it's an in-person event that's going to be streamed live on Zoom, YouTube, Facebook. There's all kinds of ways to do it. If you're interested, you can go to my profile. It's in my stories. There's a registration link. It's on Saturday. I'll keep posting it. It's going to be a great conversation with 3 other men. I just was on a call with them yesterday, and I'm so pumped. They're such passionate, just intelligent, articulate men that I'm going to be sharing the stage with. And Latinx Parenting is a great great account to follow. They're doing great work in the community. And Chancla Culture is their hashtag, and I'm all for that because no kid deserves to get hit upside the head with a chancla.
Yep, I agree. Oh, they're asking what's the TikTok username?
It's Reflective AF. If it's different, I don't know if I changed it recently, but if it's different, DM me and I'll send you the link
Okay,
to it.
I'll
But
put it
it's
on the
Reflective AF, I
caption
believe.
too. I'll put
Yeah.
it on here. Okay, awesome. Thank you so
And
much,
Reflective
Alex.
AF, Alex Flores. So my name is Alex Flores, so it's Reflective as fuck or Reflective Alex Flores. So whatever, I thought it was pretty clever.
I like it as fuck.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. We'll totally
Yes,
stay in touch
thank you
and
so
do another
much.
one. So thank you guys
All
for
right. Yeah, we'll do
watching.
another one if you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I'm so happy you invited me, and we can do another one sometime down the line.
Totally gonna do it. Thank you
All right.
guys.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. I'll see you guys.